Illinois. Welcome to Muslims Collaborify. I am Rima Kamran, Executive Director at the Illinois Muslim Civic Coalition, and we are excited to be joined by two special guests. We have Dionne Roberts Mohamed Yasir, the Community Partnership Coordinator for the Chicago region for the Census Bureau, and we are also honored to be joined by Mohamed Yasir from the Arab American Family Services, and we are talking about the census. This is the third in a series of 3 shows as we talk about the census, about making sure we're counted in Illinois, and how do we talk about the census to our communities, what challenges we face, etc. So excited to get started. Thank you both for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you so much. So let's jump right in. Dionne, you are with the U.S. Census Bureau. You've been working on the census. Since when? When did we start? When did you guys start working on the census?
So my name is Dionne Roberts Mohamed Yasir, and this is my 3rd decennial. I've been working with the census since 2000. I come back every 10 years because of my passion to make sure that people are counted. But this time around actually started around January 2017. We hired a bunch of partnership specialists to begin reaching out to our local governments and our community-based organizations to set up a strategy for reaching our general population and, of course, those who are least likely to respond to their census questionnaires. So we've been at work for quite some time. But in fact, the census has been planned out long before 2017. So before this census is over, we're already planning the next census. Okay, so we're hard at work.
It's been a year specifically for you starting to plan about the census. We talked about the census in our previous shows, but what is the census? The census, the U.S. Constitution requires that every person living in the United States must be counted every 10 years. And this time, the census will primarily take place from March through July of 2020, with Census Day being April 1st, 2020. So we've been talking about the census, and we've been talking about why the census is important. Specifically, what do you think are the most important things that our viewers need to know, Mohamed Yasir, about why the census is important for hard-to-count communities?
Well, it is very important for the hard-to-count communities, especially for the Arabic community. For instance, according to the Arab American Institute Foundation website, the Census Bureau estimated at least 1.9 million Arabs in America. However, the AAIF has estimated the Arab Americans that live in the States 3.7 million. So that is a big difference in number.
Yes.
Yeah, that is a big difference in number. So it is very important for us as Arab Americans to be counted. We are considered a hard to count, but the number one goal is to not be considered a hard to count within the 2030 census that is going to come up within the next 10 years. But the other thing, it is very important for us as well, is to be considered a great minority living in the States. It benefits our elderlies. It benefits our the people that receive public aid and people that are in need in our community.
Right, and I think, like you're mentioning, it's not just about our right to be counted. It's about federal funds for specific community needs.
Absolutely.
As well as making sure that we have political representation.
Absolutely.
So you are specifically working with the Arab American community with the Arab American Family Services, and your goal is to make sure that all Arab Americans in Illinois are counted.
Yes.
Ms. Dionne, so we've been talking about the census, we've been talking about political representation, about $700 billion in federal funds. What does that even mean? When we say that the census guides the allocation of about $700 and some estimate $800 billion in federal funding to programs, what does that mean for communities in Illinois? What does that mean for the Arab American community or all communities in Illinois?
Well, for starters, the census is a constitutional mandate. The Constitution, Article 1, Section 2 requires that we count every single person living in the United States, whether citizen or non-citizen, whether they're documented or not documented, whether they live in residential structures or happen to be experiencing homelessness for the very first time, for example. So we count every single person. We want to count them once, only once, and in the right place. In addition, of course, the census also having a complete and accurate count ensures the allocation of over $675 billion annually to the states for all types of social service programs, free and reduced lunch programs for our children. It determines where highways and bridges and all kinds of social services are placed in our community. So having a complete and accurate count makes sure that we ensure good quality of life for our families, not just this year, but for the next 10 years until we're counted again. Failure to do so, of course, would have a negative consequence to our communities. So we try to make sure that we're counted all over the United States where we live on April 1st.
On April 1st. And as you mentioned, Mohammed, like when the discrepancy is so large, imagine the amount of funding that we're losing as a community from 1.9 million that was estimated on the census to 3 point something that was estimated by the Institute. So that's a large amount of money over 10 years every year. So what happens if we're not counted? What is the consequence of not being counted? You said that obviously funding, so your community, if I'm not counted, my community is going to lose out on a lot of different programs, it sounds like.
Well, there's many consequences. Obviously, in terms of our constitutional mandate, counting everyone for equitable distribution of where our representatives are across the 50 states, we want to make sure that we have that power and that voice in Congress. In addition, it impacts local redistricting and statewide redistricting, so it impacts us politically. And of course, funding-wise, we saw in 2010, for example, many communities experienced a 1% undercount, for example, and they lost hundreds of millions of dollars in social service program funding, including Medicaid and free and reduced lunch programs and after-school programs. So it really has a direct impact on our families, on our children's future. And so this is serious, and we take it very seriously when we're developing our plan of action to reaching communities.
Wonderful. So it sounds like it's something that it's vital for our 10 years of planning for many, many different sections of the community.
Absolutely.
So I wanted to show you the operational schedule. Can you tell us a little bit about this, Dionne? So it looks like we're currently in January, August through January. So we've been focusing specifically on getting everyone ready for the census. What are we looking forward to as 2020 begins?
So the first half of the census had a lot to do with identifying structures where people live. We identify all the structures on the ground, and then we count the people within those structures to make sure we have an accurate count. We are now in peak operations where we really are in the throes of it, beginning the process of counting people. Come next month, for example, we'll go out and identify all of the group quarters, prisons, hospitals, dormitories, nursing homes, places where people who are not related to each other live and dwell under one roof, and we'll begin that process of counting them or giving them information on how they can count their residents. That takes us through to counting college students, many of whom are independent and want to be independent, but they don't know that it's not their parents who fill out their census questionnaires on April 1st.
Right?
They have to do it themselves for the very first time. So we begin that process of making sure that they understand they count on April 1st where they live. And that takes us through the general population, where most residents will receive a postcard or letter the beginning of March inviting them to self-respond for the first time online. This will be our first online census, so there will be 3 ways to self-respond: online, by course, they'll still have the option of calling an 800 number and providing those responses. And of course, we don't want to get to this phase, but should we not receive an accurate response or a full disclosure from residents, it takes us to non-response, where we'll go out and knock on doors. And of course, we try to avoid that, because when we have to knock on a door, the information is typically less reliable and less forthcoming. Mm-hmm. We want residents to feel safe and secure in providing those responses to us voluntarily on April 1st.
Okay. Mohammed, with the Arab American community, what has been the plan of action to date, and what are you guys planning? What is the community organizers, as well as those that are focusing on the census planning as the beginning, as 2020 begins?
Absolutely. So just like Dionne was saying, we don't want to get to a point where we have to knock on the doors to get to tell people. So that's when we step in as trusted community organizers, when we knock on the door and we tell the people that we know, or the people when they come into our doors, that the Census Bureau, the census is coming up in 2020, and you need to fill out the census. Not only because it's a civic duty, but it is beneficial for our community as well. And we don't only work with Arab communities, but we work with other communities as well. We've worked very well with the Spanish community. We worked very well with the Polish community. We've worked with several communities, different minorities in our community. We've reached all the way. We are located in Worth, and we've reached all the way to Joliet and to Aurora and downtown Chicago and the north side of Chicago. So we've been all over the Cook County area and even the Will County area, trying to reach those individuals, letting them know the importance of taking the 2020 census. What we also do is we assist our community with the questionnaires. We help them. We're going to assist them. We're going to provide them people that facing challenges, literacy challenges. They might computer literacy, I would say, might not be able to respond through the online or even their language proficiency. So if they won't be able to make that phone call and take the 2020 census, that's when we as community organizers step in and we assist those residents in the community with filling out the 2020 census without facing any challenges.
Well, thank you. And thank you for bringing up that it's not just the Arab American community. There's a lot of underrepresented, hard-to-count communities that may have the challenges that you mentioned, which is language, which might just be proficiency, or they just might not understand the consequences / the benefit of doing the census. So that's really important that you're focusing overall on all communities, because every single person needs to be counted.
Absolutely.
So I think, as you heard, much of the effort has been made on getting us ready to go into 2020, ready to go on the census. So we've been talking a lot about filling out the census and why it's important. Let's look at what does the census even look like. Here is a sample of the census form. So it looks really simple. It has 9 questions, and they have a variety of different questions, specifically how many people live in this home, any additional folks, is this home apartment or a mobile home, a telephone number, as well as specifically about a gender and the information for each person. And then it goes specifically into the race question. So it could be specific to Hispanic, Latino, or Spanish, or how do you identify. So as we talked about so there's 9 questions, so it should take no more than 10 minutes, hopefully, and you can do it online. But let's talk about these questions and why do you ask specifically these questions?
Sure. So, as you mentioned, we have 9 questions on the census questionnaire. We ask you about the number of people living at that address. That certainly goes to the constitutional mandate to identify every single person living in the United States on April 1st. If any additional people are living or staying at that address, trying not to miss any resident, any person who may be living with you who you wouldn't consider part of your traditional family. Whether you own or rent your home. This question, of course, bodes to certain legislative mandates to ensure fairness in housing and or fairness in identifying the statistical relevance of owners versus renters and how that may impact the community. So that's an important question to ask. And all of the questions on the census questionnaire are determined by Congress, and Congress's need to know certain information for an equitable distribution of resources and to ensure fairness and to prevent discrimination in certain ways. So that's why all of those major questions are asked on the census questionnaire. But we also ask for your gender and your date of birth. We ask for phone number on there for verification purposes. So if we should happen to have a question, we can call a resident and cross-verify those responses without having to go and knock on the door, perhaps. And then, of course, we ask race and ethnicity question. So it's a simple questionnaire, as you mentioned. It should take no more than a few minutes to answer those questions.
Okay, wonderful. And then, Mohammed, I know we've been talking about, as you mentioned, Dionne, the specific question about your race. So I guess the question here is, what if, and you can see it up on the screen, it's question 8 and 9, and there's various different categories, white, black, or African American, American Indian, etc. And you're welcome to check out this questionnaire, which is available online as well on our website, on the census. You are going to be able to see it physically before you actually have to answer these questions. What are some of the questions folks have about filling out the race-specific question on the census, and what are some of the answers that you've been able to help folks out with?
So the number 9 question is actually a huge topic. It is very deep when we're talking about identifying somebody's race. As you can see in the first box, it says white dash print, for example, German, Irish, English, Italian, Lebanese, Egyptian, etc. So, however, me personally, I would not identify myself as white because I know for a fact that I am Arab American, but not white. That falls. And there was a lot of questions that had arisen concerning that one topic. Are we Arab Americans or are we white? And the AAI had this huge discussion actually in Detroit, Michigan, which our organization had attended, and they encouraged the Arabic community to actually check the box other, all the way at the bottom where it says some other race, and they want us to write where are we originally from. So for me, for instance,
Yeah, what are you going to write?
I'm going to write Palestinian.
Okay.
I'll be a proud Arab American Palestinian. So that's what I'm going to write in those boxes because
That's how you identify, right?
Yes, that's how I identify myself. That's how most of our community identifies themselves as well. We did our little questionnaire in our community when we educate the community about what race do you normally check, and they all say we check other. And we have fought this for a very long time for us to actually have our box, which is called MENA. It's an English concept. It's an English concept that was given to people that live in the Middle East, North Africa.
Okay.
So that's why they came up with the name MENA, MENA, Middle East, North Africa. Unfortunately, we were close to get that box put into the 2020 census questionnaire, and but it was not approved at the end, coming around 2019 or 2018. So we were unfortunately not able to get that box, but we are striving for it in 2030. So what we encourage our Arabic communities to actually put Arab American, and to be more specific,
about
that
their
we're going to
original
write where you're originally from. Palestinian, Jordanian, Egyptian, Sudani, wherever
Be
you're
specific.
from.
All right, so that's, and again, how do you identify? I think we have a caller. Good evening, caller. Do you have a comment or question?
Yeah, hi, I have a question. I'm wondering, if I'm a mix of white and a minority, should I always put down my minority side as my race?
So I think the caller asked if she is a minority and if she is of mixed race, how should she self-respond? It's very important on the census questionnaire to self-respond as you identify yourself. So your response might be different than another mixed race person, and that certainly is your right. You certainly are able to check more than one box on the census questionnaire, and you can write in responses as well if those responses don't adequately reflect how you identify.
Right, and that was what Mohammed was mentioning. There is an other box, and you're welcome to respond to it as you identify. So we've been talking a lot about the census. We've talked about the census form, the importance of it. Let's talk about jobs. So this is the time that there's an opportunity to earn extra income while helping your community. I know that the Census Bureau is currently recruiting to fill hundreds of thousands of positions across the country, specifically to help assist with the 2020 census count. And you are welcome to check out the census 2020census.gov/jobs so you can learn about the opportunities available. Why is it important for hard-to-count communities, communities that might be underrepresented, to apply for the jobs. And I know that the Census Bureau is specifically looking for folks from hard-to-count communities. Why is that an important goal for the U.S. Census Bureau?
So we encourage every person to, if you're over 18, to apply for a census job. These are flexible positions that allow you to earn great pay. Up to $29.50 an hour. I see on your screen that you've reflecting the new rates that have just gone into effect. It's important because we want to hire people that speak the languages of the community, that reflect the culture of the community. That instills a certain level of trust when they're within their own community. It's one of a great way to exercise your civic responsibility, in addition to earning great pay, is to help your community members understand why the census is important for their lives and for your face to be reflected in the community doing so. So we'll have people going out knocking on doors, people working within our area census offices. We want to elicit that type of trust and safety that the census is okay. That is not harmful to our community, and only people from within the community can do that.
Right, and I know for Mohammed, on the specific Arab on the underrepresented communities, I think we've talked about how for the older generation, or for any of us, we are going to open the door, and it would be great to have someone who speaks Arabic, who speaks Hindi, and says hello to me. I think we'll kind of calm down and not be too stressed about it. And I know a friend of yours just got a job at the Census Bureau, so that's exciting for your friend.
I'm very excited for her. Yes.
Yeah. So I know that we've all been talking about making sure that you all apply for jobs. There is a timeline that you mentioned, Dionne, which is currently, it looks like you're recruiting census takers, and then the goal is for them to start off in January, with them focusing, or the work actually beginning in April. Is that right?
We're recruiting for a whole host of positions. We're hiring for IT and for partnership specialists and for field positions, yes. People, address canvassers, people who will go and work with group quarters to do advanced contact and identify those areas. People who will count those living and experiencing homelessness. So we have a wide range of positions that we're hiring for, which is why we encourage everyone to go to 2020census.gov/jobs and see which positions may suit your personality well. It's a very simple process, a simple assessment online, and completing basic questions, and that should take only a few minutes, and you'll be placed in a pool. We'll go ahead and screen you, and you'll be available to work for the decennial.
And it's and as Dionne mentioned, these are flexible positions, great paying, $29.50. That's a great job, yes. And there's a lot of flexibility based on, because they're obviously trying to cater to the communities that they represent. So we have a caller. Good evening, caller. Do you have a question or comment?
Hi, I'm calling from Chicago, and I'm here on break, and I'm wondering if I can work during my summer break, and then I also wanted to ask can grandparents work because they're retired? Do we have to be working outside? Can be working inside? So those are a lot of questions we have about jobs.
So again, wonderful question, by the way. Census jobs are perfect for college students and seniors and stay-at-home moms and dads, people who rely on part-time flexible work, but need a great salary in doing so. She asked about summer employment, and the important thing is getting in the pool of applicants now. It takes up to 60 days to clear all Census Bureau employees, obviously for the safety of the community. And so if they're not in the pool, it's very difficult when we get around to some of our bigger operations like non-response follow-up, where we'll go out knocking on doors next summer to consider you for those types of jobs. So you want to apply now and be in the pool waiting for certain operations to unfold.
Wonderful. So it sounds like there's a lot of opportunities and like part-time phone-specific work, translation services, as well as door knockers, etc. So we've been talking a little bit about the importance of the census and making sure that hard-to-count communities are a part of the conversation as well as at the tables. I want to bring to your attention a little bit about the Muslim community in Chicagoland / in the United States, actually. So we're at the intersection of race, class, lifestyle, ethnicities, and a third of the Muslim communities are Arab, a third are African American, a third are South Asian, with Latinos and East Asian, as well as African immigrants being the largest growing part of the pie. So we have talked about what are the challenges that are faced by these communities that, because of their diversity, because of the challenges they face, are hard to count. What are the challenges that you see, Mohammed, that our communities face in regards to the census?
The number one challenge that actually the Bureau might face with the hard to count communities is trust. And that's when we step in as a trusted community organization, that we come in and we build that trust between the Bureau or the census taker and the community. That our people our community walks into our organization on a daily basis. We have hundreds of people that we see a day, and when we're telling those hundreds of people a day, and it's kind of more of a network. It's more of a network that we're telling one person that one person is telling somebody else. So I would say 2/3 of our community right now was aware of census because of the word that we are bringing out to the Arabic community specifically and to the community in general, that we're trying to build that trust where they have no fear, especially with our undocumented residents, or with our residents that that are scared of scams, or residents that just don't want to do it, and we do share that benefits of actually taking the census, the questionnaire seriously, so that we can have more of our representation in our power. Yes.
Yeah, so the trusted voices is one of the key things here, making sure that you're talking about the census, you're doing the census, and then making sure that you're talking to family and friends to ensure that they complete it themselves. Another great resource on the www.Illinois Muslim Civic Coalition, IL Muslim Civic Coalition, is a great option, which is census stories. These are great stories that you can find on our website to talk about, and they're translatable in Arabic as well as Spanish and French, talking about why the census is important from a personal story, as well as making sure that we encourage our communities when they recognize one of their own, saying that I'm going to take the census, are you going to take it? So we're coming to the end of our show. I wanted to take a moment to thank both our guests, and I wanted to say, what is the one thing that you would tell folks to do, our viewers to do, at the end of the show tonight? What are things that, just one thing, what do you say, Ms. Dionne?
I'm actually going to list 3 things. I want people to walk away and apply for census jobs. It's critical for our community. I want people to make sure they count every single person living in their household, whether related or non-related, on April 1st, and to join other trusted voices by establishing a complete count committee or joining a complete count committee to educate, encourage, and engage those who are least likely to self-respond to that the census is safe. And that is confidential. We're not allowed to disclose their information to any third-party entity, and it's safe, it's easy, and it's important. I want them to shape their future when they leave here, and they can start by doing that now.
Yeah. Yes. Wonderful. Mohammed, one thing. She totally cheated, but you got one thing. Quick.
That one thing I want is to people actually bring that voice that we actually exist. Arab Americans do exist, and we want them to assist us on bringing that voice.
Right, and as they both mentioned, this is on all of us to make sure that we're counted. Thank you so much for joining us on Muslims Collabrify. Collaborate, amplify, build civic power. I am Rima Kamran from the Illinois Muslim Civic Coalition. Check us out on our website, ilmuslimciviccoalition.org. Thank you to my wonderful guests, Dionne Roberts and Mohamed Yasir. We hope you have a great evening, and join us next week at 7:30 on Monday.